High Noon was not just a classic Western. It was a ticking time bomb of political vengeance. A film where the real-life villain was a United States senator, the hero was a blacklisted writer in disguise, and the most dangerous showdown nearly killed the director on a live train track. Behind the myth of the lone marshal stands a production mired in betrayal, where the screenwriter saw his own impending ruin in every frame, where the star's personal agony became his Oscar-winning performance, and where Hollywood's most iconic conservative was forced to praise the un-American film he tried to destroy. This is the story of a movie that was almost never made, was hated by the genre's giants, and was so politically explosive it inspired a president's direct rebuttal. I am about to reveal 20 weird facts about High Noon that will change how you see this parable of courage forever. And stick around for the bonus fact that exposes the real, heartbroken woman whose letter from the set revealed the film's darkest, most personal secret. Number 20. The script was a direct allegory of the Hollywood Blacklist. As screenwriter Carl Foreman typed the story of Marshal Will Kane being abandoned by his town, he was not just writing a Western, he was writing his own obituary. In 1951, Carl Foreman was subpoenaed by the House Un-American Activities Committee to testify about past Communist Party membership. Facing the choice of naming names or being blacklisted, Carl Foreman saw his own plight in Kane's. The four gunmen coming on the noon train were the House Un-American Activities Committee. The cowardly townspeople were his Hollywood colleagues, too scared to defend him. As I was writing the screenplay, it became insane, because life was mirroring art, and art was mirroring life, Carl Foreman recalled. I became that guy. I became the Gary Cooper character. The film was his final, coded cry for help before he was forced into exile. Number 19. John Wayne hated the film, but accepted its Oscar. John Wayne did not just turn down the role of Will Kane, he loathed everything the film stood for. He called it the most un-American thing I have ever seen in my whole life, and later boasted he helped run Carl Foreman out of the country. The ultimate irony came on Oscar night. Gary Cooper, winning Best Actor, was filming in Mexico and asked his friend John Wayne to accept the award on his behalf. There stood John Wayne, the film's most powerful enemy, forced to praise Coop on national television, even joking he was mighty thrilled to accept an award for a movie he wished he had starred in. It was a moment of pure, bitter Hollywood hypocrisy. Number 18. Gary Cooper's pain was not acting, it was real agony. The look of sheer, bone-deep exhaustion on Will Kane's face is one of cinema's most authentic performances because Gary Cooper was in real, chronic pain. At 51, Gary Cooper was plagued by stomach ulcers, severe back problems, and a debilitating hip injury that made his famous, stiff-legged walk a physical necessity, not a directorial choice. His personal life was in shambles. Separated from his wife, and his public affair with actress Patricia Neal was crumbling. The day he had to lift Grace Kelly in the wedding scene was reportedly pure torture. His haggard appearance required almost no makeup, and his profound weariness gave Kane a vulnerability no other actor could have faked. Number 17. The director and cameraman were nearly killed by a runaway train. The film's most suspenseful shot, the train approaching with black smoke billowing, almost became a real-life tragedy. Director Fred Zinnemann and cinematographer Floyd Crosby lay on the tracks with their camera to get the low-angle shot. They cheered when the smoke turned from white to black, thinking it looked dramatic. They did not know black smoke was a signal the train's brakes were failing. The engine kept coming. At the last second, they scrambled away. The tripod snagged on the rail, and the camera was smashed to pieces as the train roared over it. Miraculously, the film magazine survived, and that near-death shot is in the final movie. Number 16. Grace Kelly was hired from a photograph, and the producer regretted it. The role of Amy Kane, the pacifist Quaker bride, went to a 22-year-old model and theater actress with almost no film experience, Grace Kelly. Producer Stanley Kramer cast her solely based on a photograph, without a meeting or screen test. He did not even tell director Fred Zinnemann until after the fact. On set, Grace Kelly was painfully aware of her own inexperience, feeling stiff and wooden. Fred Zinnemann, however, thought her prim, formal demeanor was perfect for the Easterner in the wilds. In a brutal twist, Stanley Kramer later admitted he thought she was miscast and too young for Gary Cooper. Number 15. The film's politics are a Rorschach test for United States presidents. High Noon is a political paradox. Liberals saw it as an anti-McCarthy allegory about standing alone against a mob. Conservatives saw it as a law and order fable about a principled man defending civilization. This ambiguity made it a favorite in the White House. President Ronald Reagan called it his favorite film. President Bill Clinton loved it so much he screened it 17 times for staff, using it as a lesson in principled decision-making. Both leaders saw themselves in the lonely, dutiful marshal, proving the film's power as a mirror for any leader's ego. Number 14. A major Western director hated it so much he made a rebuttal movie. Legendary director Howard Hawks, known for Rio Bravo and Red River, despised High Noon. He thought the premise was cowardly. "I did not think a good town marshal was going to run around town like a chicken with his head cut off asking everyone to help," he scoffed. His contempt was so deep that he made Rio Bravo in 1959 as a direct, point-by-point rebuttal. Where Kane pleads for help, John Wayne's sheriff John T. Chance refuses it. Where Kane's wife saves him, Chance protects the vulnerable. Rio Bravo was the manifesto of Howard Hawks for how a real lawman should behave. Number 13. The entire movie was shot in color first, then scrapped. In an era when studios were pushing for color, the crew of High Noon initially shot the first few scenes with color film. Director Fred Zinnemann and producer Stanley Kramer looked at the dailies and hated it. The vibrant colors worked against the tense, stark, morally gray atmosphere they wanted. They made the costly decision to abandon all the color footage and start over in black and white. This proved genius. The black and white film, combined with the smoggy skies of the Burbank backlot, created a stark, bleached white sky that perfectly contrasted with the black suit of Gary Cooper, visually trapping him in a moral desert. Number 12. The Oscar-winning song almost sank the movie. The haunting theme, "Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darlin'," made history as one of the first pop songs marketed separately from a non-musical film. But in the editing room, producer Stanley Kramer loved it too much. He placed it over countless scenes, using it as a crutch. At the first preview, the audience initially liked the song, but as it repeated again and again, they grew restless, then started laughing and mockingly singing along. The preview was a disaster. Advisors told Stanley Kramer to cut the song entirely. Instead, he wisely scaled it back to a few key moments, saving both the film's mood and its future Oscar-winning theme. Number 11. Lee Van Cleef lost a role because of his nose. Before he was the iconic heavy in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Lee Van Cleef was hired to play Deputy Harvey Pell. But producer Stanley Kramer took one look at him and decided his sharp, hooked nose made him look too much like a villain. Stanley Kramer told Lee Van Cleef to get a nose job if he wanted the part. Lee Van Cleef refused. He was demoted to the tiny, silent role of gunman Jack Colby, and the deputy role went to Lloyd Bridges. The defiant profile of Lee Van Cleef would, of course, become one of the most famous villainous mugs in cinema history just a few years later. But before we get to the next fact, go ahead and like and subscribe because the top 10 facts get even wilder, from the secret affairs that rocked the set to the shocking reason the film's most famous fan demanded his name be removed from the credits. This town is full of secrets. Number 10. The set was a hotbed of secret affairs. For a film about duty and marriage, the High Noon set was rocked by infidelity. The 51-year-old married Gary Cooper began an affair with his 22-year-old co-star, Grace Kelly. He had to hide it from his girlfriend, Patricia Neal, when she visited the set. Simultaneously, director Fred Zinnemann was also reportedly having an affair with Grace Kelly. And screenwriter Carl Foreman, in the midst of his House Un-American Activities Committee crisis, began an affair with his Mexican-born star, Katie Jurado. The moral clarity on screen was nowhere to be found behind the scenes. Number 9. Gary Cooper was the last choice for the hero. Will Kane is so inseparable from Gary Cooper, it is shocking to learn he was far down the casting list. The role was offered to almost every major star first. Marlon Brando, Montgomery Clift, Charlton Heston, and Gregory Peck all turned it down. Gregory Peck refused because he did not think it could top his own Western, The Gunfighter. Even John Wayne was offered it before saying no. Gary Cooper, his career in a slump, took it for a fraction of his usual salary. His career-reviving, Oscar-winning performance was Hollywood's greatest consolation prize. Number 8. The real-time clock is a fraud. The film is famous for unfolding in real time, with the 85-minute runtime matching the story's 85-minute countdown to noon. But it is a brilliant illusion. The term real time did not even exist in 1952. Furthermore, if you track the numerous clocks shown throughout Hadleyville, you will see they advance at different, inconsistent speeds. The film actually covers about 100 minutes of story time, compressed by clever editing and the relentless tension of the score of Dmitri Tiomkin. The clock-watching anxiety is a masterful cinematic trick. Number 7. The producer betrayed the screenwriter to save himself. As the House Un-American Activities Committee testimony of Carl Foreman made him a pariah, his best friend and production partner, Stanley Kramer, faced a choice: stand by his friend or save his own career. Stanley Kramer chose himself. He dissolved their partnership and tried to have the name of Carl Foreman removed from the film. He even claimed Carl Foreman threatened to falsely name him as a communist. Abandoned, Carl Foreman sold his stake and fled to England. The man who wrote a masterpiece about loyalty was brutally betrayed by his closest ally, mirroring the betrayal of Will Kane by his town. Number 6. The film's visual style was inspired by Civil War photography. To break from the grand, picturesque style of John Ford westerns, director Fred Zinnemann and cinematographer Floyd Crosby studied the work of Civil War photographer Matthew Brady. They wanted a gritty, documentary feel, flat light, grainy texture, and a sense of harsh, unvarnished reality. This is why the film looks less like a mythic landscape and more like a historical record. The blinding white skies of the Burbank backlot, achieved thanks to Los Angeles smog, added to this stark, bleached-out, almost desperate aesthetic. Number 5. Katie Jurato's character broke the Western mold. As Helen Ramirez, the former lover of both Will Kane and the villain Frank Miller, Katie Jurado delivered a performance that shattered stereotypes. Her character was a complex, independent Mexican businesswoman, a rarity in Hollywood at the time. She wielded power and insight the other townspeople lacked, seeing the moral crisis clearly. The powerful presence of Katie Jurado was so striking, she won the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress, breaking barriers and becoming one of the film's most memorable figures. Number 4. The film invented the modern movie theme song. Before High Noon, non-musical films did not have pop theme songs marketed to the public. The score of Dmitri Tiomkin, with lyrics by Ned Washington, changed everything. Do Not Forsake Me was released as a single by Tex Ritter, who was the father of actor John Ritter, and became a massive hit. It played on the radio, separate from the movie, creating a new revenue stream and a new way to build anticipation. The film's use of the song as a recurring musical motif throughout the story set the template for countless film scores to come. Number 3. Gary Cooper's father inspired his performance. In his time of personal and physical pain, Gary Cooper found his motivation for playing Will Kane in a lesson from his father, Charles Cooper, who served as a Montana Supreme Court justice. His father taught him that law enforcement was everybody's job. This ideal of civic duty, juxtaposed against the town's cowardice, became the core of the performance of Gary Cooper. He was not just playing a script. He was honoring the code of his father, adding a layer of profound personal conviction to the resolve of Will Kane. Number 2. The story's origins sparked a bitter feud. The credit reads based on a story by John W. Cunningham, but screenwriter Carl Foreman always claimed the idea was his. He said he wrote a 4-page outline, only to be told it resembled the short story The Tin Star of John W. Cunningham. To avoid legal trouble, he bought the rights. Years later, Carl Foreman accused producer Stanley Kramer of downplaying his creative role to sideline him during the Blacklist. The feud over who truly authored High Noon continued long after the film's release, a final layer of conflict around a film born of conflict. Number 1. The film's legacy was sealed by its biggest enemy. Despite being denounced as un-American, High Noon was a colossal hit, earning $12 million on a $750,000 budget. It won 4 Academy Awards. In 1989, it was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry. Its ultimate vindication? The very political machinery it critiqued ultimately embraced it. The film endured, not in spite of the controversy, but because of it. Its power to provoke debate about duty, courage, and community ensured its place not just as a great Western, but as an essential American document. Bonus fact, the lovelorn letter that revealed the set's true melancholy. The deepest secret of High Noon is captured not in a document, but in a heartbroken letter. While Gary Cooper was publicly entangled with Grace Kelly, his longtime lover, actress Patricia Neal, was in New York. She wrote him a desperate, lonely letter during filming, which was later preserved. In it, she speaks of her love, her pain at their separation, and the gossip she hears about him and his young co-star. This private document, from a woman caught in the storm of the life of Gary Cooper, reveals the profound human sadness and instability that swirled just off camera. The weary despair Gary Cooper channeled into Will Kane was not just physical pain or political anger, it was also the guilt and melancholy of a man breaking hearts while trying to be a hero. The film's stark moral universe was built, in part, on this very real, very messy human pain. High Noon endures because it is a perfect paradox, a Western with almost no action, a political film claimed by both left and right, a story of towering principle made by people mired in personal failings. It captured the anxious soul of 1950s America, the fear of the mob, the terror of abandonment, the crushing weight of doing the right thing alone. Its legacy is measured in the films it inspired, the debates it ignited, and the timeless, terrifying question it asks: when the clock strikes noon, who among us will actually step into the street? So the next time you face a moment of moral choice, remember Will Kane in his black suit, walking toward his destiny, abandoned by everyone, and ask yourself, what is on your badge?